The wind howled through the nearly deserted streets as Christmas Eve night settled over the city. Snowflakes drifted down like forgotten prayers, illuminated in the glow of streetlights that flickered and sighed in the bitter cold. On a worn bench outside an old church stood a woman wrapped in a threadbare coat, hands trembling, tears frozen on her cheeks. Her breath came in shallow puffs of white, little clouds evaporating instantly into the night. Her name was Elena, and until just a few hours ago, she had believed Christmas was about warmth, family, laughter, and lights that never went dim. Now she believed none of those things were meant for her. Elena had always been different, not because she wanted to be, but because she was deaf. She was born that way, and though she had learned sign language as a child and lip reading as she grew older, the world beyond those who cared was hollow with silence and misunderstanding. Words to others were music and laughter, things that danced freely around people, but for her, language was visual, tactile, and deeply felt. It was lovely, but in a world that did not always notice her, it often felt lonely. Tonight, the loneliness had cut sharp. She had come to the city's central Christmas Eve service earlier in the evening, hoping the beauty of the candles and the choir might somehow reach her heart. She had sat alone in the pews at the back, watching the flicker of flames and the movement of lips singing carols she could not hear. She tried to sing along silently, letting her fingers move in gentle signs because that was how she connected with what the music meant, the joy, the hope, the promise of peace. But every time she tried, something inside her gave way until she could only slip out into the night and let her tears fall. She had no family left. They were gone, lost to time, distance, and the quiet drift of life that had taken them away piece by piece. She had no one to go home to, no warm fire waiting, no voice to say her name. Even the echo of those things was gone now. Sometimes she wondered if the world had forgotten her and everyone like her heart was something too fragile to be noticed. The church bell tolled midnight, each chime echoing like a lonely heartbeat in her chest. She watched the last bell ring, and then she closed her eyes against the biting wind, leaning back on the cold wood of the bench. She had nothing left to give, no hope, no strength, no cheer for the holiday. All that remained were numbness and the pain of a year she would rather forget. A sudden wave of steps crunched over the snow, breaking her reverie. She opened her eyes to see a man approach with a young boy at his side. They looked tired but warm, bundled in thick coats and bright scarves, cheeks flushed from the cold. The boy carried a small backpack and kept glancing around as though searching for something, or someone. The man walked with a gentle, purposeful stride, his eyes kind but weary. They stopped a few feet away from her, and the boy spotted Elena sitting on the bench. He looked at her for a moment, then tugged on the man's sleeve. "Dad, that lady, is she okay?" The man, whose name was Matthew, knelt down to the boy's level. He was a single father, a fact he carried in every quiet decision and every glance toward his son. The previous year, Christmas had been full of joy and chaos, with a home filled with oatmeal on the floor, tiny footprints on the couch, and a loud rendition of every holiday song known to humankind. This year was quiet, quieter than either of them expected. Matthew had wanted to make Christmas special despite the struggle of balancing a demanding job and building a stable home for his son since the boy's mother had passed away. He wasn't sure he had succeeded. Matthew watched his son look at Elena with sincerity, that unfiltered pure concern that children sometimes show without reservation. It reminded him how fragile the world could feel, and how sometimes the smallest moments mattered most. "I'm not sure," Matthew said softly. "Maybe she's just cold. Do you think she needs help?" The boy nodded. "She looks sad, Dad. Maybe she's alone." Matthew stood up and took a careful step toward Elena. The snow fell heavier now, frosting her hair and shoulders. He swallowed, uncertain of what to say or do. He knelt down slowly so as not to startle her. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Elena did not flinch, but her eyes widened slightly. She watched him, and for a moment she just stared at this stranger, uncertain. He tried again. "Hi, Merry Christmas. Are you okay?" Elena blinked once, then twice. She didn't speak. He watched her lips move as if she wanted to respond, and then, astonishingly, she began to sign. Matthew didn't know sign language well, only the basics he had picked up in a class he took after a coworker's child was born deaf. But he could catch a few familiar signs. Her hands moved gently, beginning to explain something. The boy, sitting next to him, watched her hands with fascination. What is she saying? Matthew whispered. I don't know, his son replied, leaning closer. But I think she's saying she's alone. Matthew's heart tightened. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small notepad and pen, one thing he always kept with him for communication when words weren't enough. He scribbled, "Are you hurt? Do you need help?" and lifted the pad for her to see. Elena's eyes softened as she read the words. She signed slowly, carefully, trying to articulate what she felt. I am alone. I came to the service but I couldn't stay. My family, gone. Her hands trembled as they formed the words, each movement etched with pain. Matthew watched every gesture, trying to understand. He felt warmth spread through his chest, not from the cold but from empathy, deep, genuine empathy. He knelt there, listening in silence to her unspoken sorrow. His son shifted in his seat and then, without hesitation, stood up and signed to her with a bright, earnest smile, "Come home with us." Elena stared at the boy, her expression a blend of surprise and disbelief. The words struck something fragile and wounded inside her, a place she had nearly given up on protecting. The child's innocence, his willingness to reach beyond the chasm of her loneliness, softened her heart more than years of wanting warmth had. Matthew looked at his son in astonishment, then back at Elena. He nodded slowly, lifting his pen and writing, "Would you like that? Come home with us." Elena's lips quivered. She lowered her eyes, looking down at the snow melting on her shoelaces for a moment before lifting her gaze again. Her eyes glistened, not just with tears, but with something she had forgotten for a long time, hope. She nodded once, gently, cautiously, as though she feared the world might shift beneath her feet if she dared to believe. The boy beamed. "Yes, you can come with us. We have hot chocolate and cookies at home." Matthew smiled, and something in that moment felt like light returning to the world. He helped Elena to her feet, offering her his coat without a word. He didn't need to, his actions spoke clearly. You belong, and you are not alone anymore. They walked together through the snowy streets as the city slept under its blanket of white. Elena walked between Matthew and his son, shivering less now, wrapped in warmth and the gentle assurance of company. They passed lights and wreaths, strangers bundled up like colorful marshmallows hurrying home, each with their own stories, though none as poignant as the one emerging in that moment. At the bus stop, they waited briefly, and then the bus arrived, doors hissing open. The heat inside washed over them, and Elena's breath caught as warmth touched her cheeks. They sat together, and for the first time that night, Elena smiled in a way that wasn't sadness but something radiant and new. The ride to their apartment was quiet but comfortable, not awkward, just peaceful. Matthew's son chatted happily, pointing out snowmen in yards and Christmas lights that blinked like stars caught on Earth. Elena nodded and smiled, occasionally signing small phrases of appreciation. The boy watched her with rapt interest as if discovering a new language of gestures that felt like poetry in motion. When they arrived at the apartment, the place was warm and glowing with holiday decorations. An aromatic scent of cinnamon and chocolate greeted them, and for a moment Elena stood at the threshold, overwhelmed by the sense that someone cared, something she had not felt in a long time. Inside, there was a small tree with twinkling lights and wrapped presents. The boy tugged gently on Elena's coat. "Come on, we have cookies and hot chocolate ready." Matthew helped her take off her coat as his son disappeared to fetch mugs. Elena looked around the room, a gentle awe on her face. The apartment wasn't large, but it was full of life, the kind of life that felt more precious than gold. They sat around the coffee table, mugs in hands, and the warmth of the cocoa spread through Elena's fingers like kindness she had never quite expected. The boy offered her a cookie, one with sprinkles and icing, and she took it with a grateful smile. As they sat together, Elena signed slowly to Matthew, "Thank you. You are kind. I don't know what to say." Matthew reached for his pen again and wrote, "You don't have to say anything. We're glad you're here." She looked at him deeply, her heart swelling more than her eyes could contain. She signed again, more confidently this time, "I thought Christmas was only lights and noise. I forgot it could be this, warmth, even in quiet." The boy grinned. "Quiet can be good, and Christmas is for everyone. Even super cool sign language people." Elena laughed, a soft, joyful sound that seemed to fill every corner of that small room like golden sunshine. She reached out and gently squeezed the boy's hand, a gesture that spoke more than words ever could. The evening stretched on in simple bliss, laughter, stories drawn in signs and written notes, the kind of connection that felt like a homecoming of the soul. They shared cookies and cups of cocoa, and when Matteo turned on gentle holiday music, Elena didn't try to sing with her voice, but with her heart, letting the rhythm guide her fingers in the language she loved. Matthew watched them with gratitude so deep it nearly brought tears to his eyes. For all the hardship of the past year, the late nights, the exhaustion, the fear of not being enough as a parent, in that moment he felt complete. They had found someone who needed them, and by welcoming her, they had opened their own hearts wider than they knew possible. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in softness and light. Inside, the flame of Christmas shone brighter than ever, not because of decorations or gifts, but because three souls had found each other in a moment of profound tenderness. Elena sat by the window later, watching the snowflakes drift down like messages from somewhere warm and gentle. She thought not of loneliness, but of the miracle that had unfolded, a single act of kindness that changed the course of her night, maybe her life. Matthew and his son sat nearby, talking about Christmas morning plans. The boy wanted to build the biggest snowman ever, and Elena sighed gleefully. She would help. In a world that once felt silent and cold, she had found voices in sign, laughter, care, and belonging. Christmas Eve became Christmas always for her. A reminder that kindness can reach beyond words, that family can be chosen, and that healing begins when someone says, without hesitation, "Come home with us." And in that living room, warmed by cocoa and open hearts, Christmas glowed. Not as a memory of lights and noise, but as a promise of hope, shared humanity, and the gentle power of caring for one another.